Perek HaSorches HaPoelim Daf Peiches, sponsored Lili Nishmas Imi Marasi, Binsa Basarab Shloimeh. The Gemara begins with the Machloikis Rabbi Yani Rabbi Yochanan. One is obligated to tithe his produce from the Torah. Rabbi Yani holds even after the Miruach, the smoothing of the grain, one is not obligated to tithe biblically until it enters his house through the main entrance, based on the verse Biarti HaKodesh Min HaBayis. However, if it will not enter the house, one is obligated to tithe rabbinically after the Gemar Malacha, which is the smoothing of the pile. If after smoothing he intends to bring it into the house, then he is required to tithe rabbinically. If he heats it, he salts it, removes its truma, or consumes it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan holds even one's courtyard establishes the obligation to tithe based on the verse V'achlu bish'orecha v'saveyu. However, it has to be a chatzar mishtamer, a guarded courtyard. Tosfos states Rabbi Yanai holds that there is a rabbinic obligation in a courtyard. The Gemara discusses the law of tithing for a buyer. The Gemara attempts to prove that tithing is required for a buyer from the Torah based on the verse Ki savoy el kerem reyecha v'achauta anavim kinavshecha. This verse refers to a worker harvesting the field. The Torah teaches he is similar to the owner who can eat without tithing while harvesting, to the exclusion of a buyer. However, from the verse Aser ta'aser is called Tvuas zarecha v'achauta, a seller and a buyer are excluded. Your seed refers to what you grew, not what was bought. Midrabanan, both must be tithed. The Gemara concludes the verse Kinafshecha that excludes a buyer is an asmachta, a rabbinic law attached to scripture. Lamaisa, there is a machloikis rishonim if the exemption applies to all bought produce, or it depends when it was bought, before or after the miruach. The word kinafshecha actually teaches another law. The owner is not liable for muzzling his worker. The Gemara teaches another tithing law. The generic term describing the point where produce cannot be eaten anymore as a meal without tithing is called goren. However, there is another stage beyond where one cannot even snack on food without tithing. For example, regarding cucumbers and gourds, it is mishe yifseku, when their blossoms fall off. The Gemara teaches that after brought into the house, even if only one cucumber or gourd loses a blossom, all of them must be tithed. The Gemara brings an opinion according to Rabbi Yanai. The requirement of roa pnei abayis applies only to olive and grapes, not to grain. This refers to grapes and olives he intends to eat. Since they do not undergo any form of miruach, smoothing, their gemar malacha is bringing them into the house. However, grain is koveya lemaisrus, establishes a tithing obligation on the threshing floor before being brought into the house. Olives and grapes used to make oil and wine establish a tithing obligation when the wine and oil is collected in their vats. The Gemara questions the source permitting a human being to consume detached produce. Number one, the Torah uses the term kama twice in the context of workers' rights. The first we learned teaches that it is permitted to eat any agricultural product that its source stands. The second applies to another context, detached produce, based on the hermeneutical rule, Taneu le'inyan acher. Number two, Rav Ami holds Talush does not need a special verse. The verse, Kisavo b'cherem reyecha, applies not only to one harvesting grapes, but also one carrying them from the field after the harvest. The Gemara questions the source for an ox to eat from a chuber, attached produce. It says, reyecha twice in relation to attached produce. The first we learned is to exclude the produce of a Gentile employer, that the Jewish worker is permitted to place the produce in his basket, or that of Hegdish, which he cannot even nibble off the vines. The second, based on the hermeneutical rule, Taneu Linyan Acher, teaches to apply the second to a different context, the permit for an ox to eat from attached produce. Number 2, Ravina holds neither Adam Betalush V'Shor B'Mechuber requires a special verse, since there is a Gzera Shava to teach that the prohibition of muzzling applies to all animals. The verse could have said, Loi Sadush B'Chasima. It says, shor, to compare the muzzler to the muzzled and the muzzled to the muzzler.